Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, two underscores, ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. If not, it's holiday time, so I will gladly take gallons of eggnog which I'm consuming by the day. And it's also the night before Thanksgiving, so I'll also take some mashed potatoes, some stuffing, some sweet potatoes, some turkey, some ham, some apple pie, some more eggnog, some more stuffing, all that stuff. We are live here on Disguise Coverage as we are doing this little intro, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up, you guys know it by now, official sponsor of Disguise Coverage, One Pie Pizza, open Monday through Saturday, 11 to 8 or until sold out. Delicious sweet sauce pie, homemade blue cheese, great people. They did the cancer knockout fight that we talked about here in October, where a portion of every pizza sold went to Roswell Park Cancer Institute in the fight against cancer. They're doing a toy drive this year in November. We posted a whole bunch about it. You see the Twitter handle there. Go and check them out on the old Twitter. And also the online menu can be found in the episode description here. Go check them out. Get yourself a delicious pie and some homemade blue cheese and do some good for the community while you are also at it. And tonight I'm not alone. I've said we multiple times, and as you should have guessed by the episode description and the promos that went out for this tweet, I am not alone in tonight's episode. So without further ado, Mr. Chris Voglu, from many things, writer for The Spun and SI Now, host of the Straight Up Saints podcast. Thanks for coming by, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony. Thank you for having me on, man. I'm excited to talk Bills Saints. It should be fun.
So this is obviously a big game for the Bills, especially after what happened with the loss of the Jaguars, and then everybody thinks they turned it around against the Jets, and then they look terrible against the Colts. But this is also a big game for the Saints as well. You guys had that really nice win against Tampa Bay with Trevor Simeon. Pick off Brady at the end. It's looking good. You're sitting there at 5-2, and then you have a heartbreaking loss to Atlanta. You have a really close one against Tennessee, where I think you guys got hosed on some of the red zone calls there that allowed Tennessee to score a touchdown. You lose by 2. Have the game against Philly last week. You've lost 3 in a row, but this is a big game for the Saints. Like, they know they're sitting there at the 7th seed right now at 5-5. This is a big game for them as well, correct?
It absolutely is. To your point, it's kind of funny if we dial back the clocks a couple of weeks. We're looking at this match and we're like, the Saints look like a sneaky contender. The Bills are a favorite for a lot of people, and then we're looking at this one, and I've seen every talk show go, all right, this is one of those both of them got to have it games. And I guess in one way, it kind of ups the ante and the urgency for both teams, which is kind of cool. But I'm pretty sure 3 weeks ago when the Saints were 5-2, I was looking at this game like that's a marquee game, and now I'm like, I mean, is it the 4th loss in a row? I have no idea what it'll end up being, but yeah, it definitely changes things.
It's super funny. Like when the schedule first came out, is one that immediately caught my eye. I'm kind of like a low-key Saints fan. I've had Alvin Kamara on my main fantasy league every year since he was a rookie. I love his play style. And how, if you love football, how can you not love like DeMario Davis and Malcolm Jenkins and Cam Jordan? And so when I saw we were playing the Saints, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And immediately in my head, I was like, okay, no Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, going through all the different things. And here we are. And the Saints team is drastically different than the one I think a lot of Bills fans thought the Bills would be playing coming into this Thanksgiving weekend, especially with the recent rash of injuries. And just to go through some of them, we know Alvin Kamara is out for tomorrow. Tackle Ryan Ramczyk, who is fantastic, he is now out. Marcus Davenport is out. Passanio is out. Terran Armstead is questionable. Mark Ingram is questionable. And that's in addition to guys like Andres Pete, who had season-ending shoulder surgery, and he's out for the year. Let's start with that injury piece. And, I went through some of the guys, but how much of a factor are those guys that are missing or potentially playing hurt? Like if Armstead and Ingram play, how much is that going to be a factor in tomorrow night's game?
Yeah, I think it definitely will. I think Armstead and Ingram, I kind of think that they will play. I do think that what they'll look like, I'm a little on the, on the fence about how they'll look, but I think the Saints are going to need them out there. The problem is for me, I'm one of those people that I hate to say injuries are killing a team because I know everyone's hurt. Yeah. But the problem with the Saints is now it's not just the front line. The second line of defense is getting hurt now too. I put out a tweet a couple of days ago. The Saints have 18 players who are either currently hurt or out for the year. And it's like, at first, if it's like one group, you could say fine, but Armstead and Ramczyk go down. Our rookie left tackle who comes in, he actually gets a season-ending foot injury on Sunday. He's out. So then if Armstead doesn't play, then you're on your fourth string tackle. It's just a mess there. And then for running back, I think, again, if Ingram plays, losing Kamara hurts, but I think the Saints can find ways to go around that. But you look at the defensive line, no Peyton Turner, the rookie from Houston, no Marcus Davenport, no Tano Passanio that you mentioned. So it's just Granderson and Cam Jordan. They're going to have to play the majority of the snaps. And I'm going to be honest, they haven't looked particularly great, those two players. So the injuries have hurt. And I think for the Saints, you're going to have to get creative to beat the Bills. So it's going to be interesting.
We'll stick with the offensive line. You know, you started to dive into it with the injuries and what they're going to be looking like. How much does, you know, this offensive line in terms of what the grouping that they're going to trot out tomorrow, how does that impact what the Saints are going to try to do offensively? You know, they're already down to Trevor Simeon after Jameis Winston goes down. Taysom Hill is back. You know, the offense, Sean Payton is one of the most brilliant coaches in the NFL. I mean, not just offensively, but I love his style and his game planning. But how much of it comes down to how this offensive line can execute given who they have available up front?
Yeah, it's a big thing. So I think that's the importance of getting back Armstead. You know, a lot was made about the way Simeon played on Sunday against the Eagles, and it was by far his worst start out of the three so far. But it was also worth noting that they didn't have their starting left tackle, their starting right tackle, and their starting left guard. And now the left guard spot, I think that one we can get over now. Andrews Pete's been out enough times that you feel like Calvin Throckmorton's kind of cemented his status as I would say, a serviceable left guard to the point where, okay, you consider him an honorary starter. But getting back Armstead would be huge because now it's just you kick over Hurst to right tackle, and you're really and with Hurst, he's played a lot of time for the Saints due to injuries. He's another guy I consider an honorary starter, so at least the communication is better. And I noticed, particularly against that Eagles game, the communication was putrid. And on top of it, when you don't have your left tackle out there, Trevor Simeon's rushing throws. But the weird thing in particular was the way the interior played, specifically in terms of covering the gaps and making sure what was going on there. There was too many blitzes where maybe it's on Simeon, maybe it's on the communication on the O-line, but they just look completely out of sorts, particularly on the left side. So getting back Armstead would help a lot. I don't know, per se that it necessarily changes everything. I think what would really change everything was if Ramczyk came back as well. Then we're talking about, okay, can the Saints kind of dominate in the trenches to, control the clock, keep Josh Allen off the field? But I won't, I'm not going to say that Teron Armstead coming back doesn't help the Saints. It absolutely will. But there are still questions that need to be answered about how are the Saints going to handle extra rushers if that's what the Bills choose to do over the course of Thursday's game.
You mentioned the interior and touched on it a little bit. Talk about the interior of that offensive line, because Ruiz and McCoy were two of my favorite prospects when they came out in the draft in their respective years. And they're especially Ruiz is so versatile at center and guard. But talk about those two and how strong they've been for the Saints inside.
So if you ask any Saints fan about Eric McCoy, they're just going to rant and rave, and they're going to talk about this guy like he might be a family member. Everyone loves Eric McCoy in New Orleans. And you know what? He makes at least 1 to 2 plays per game where it's like, why is he 20 yards down the field blocking? Like, it makes no sense, but he's able to do it. Ruiz is the head scratcher for me because coming out of college, I loved Cesar Ruiz. Going through the process, I remember when the Saints drafted him, they got a lot of pushback. People wanted Brandon Ayuk. People wanted Chase Claypool. They wanted a fancy weapon. And I kind of understood why the Saints took Ruiz, fortify the interior. You still had Drew Brees at the time. I said, this makes sense to me. Ruiz's problem has been inconsistency. One game, he looks pretty steady, and then the next game's just a mess. And it's trying to find that balance with him. I do wonder, though, is it easier for Ruiz, though, when you have Ramczyk back and you're sandwiched between Ramczyk and McCoy, and they can help you out from time to time if things get bad. Right now, he doesn't have that luxury because the Saints are playing with a makeshift O-line, so I'll cut him some slack there. But he's a name where I think that depending on the type of night he has, the Bills could have their way with Ruiz. I do not think McCoy is a guy you have your way with. I think he is going to make at least 1 to 2 flashy plays, whether it's on a screen game or on a swing run. He'll find a way to make an impact there. But Ruiz has been the head scratcher, and I don't want to give up on him yet. It's just year 2. But I do wonder the switch from center to guard, how much that affected or stunted his growth, because I have not seen consistency yet from a player who I thought was the best high school center and then the best college center, and it hasn't translated to the guard spot.
Yeah, we had a similar situation with Cody Ford, although he's been largely disappointing. But the whole talk of, when he first came in, it was like, well, guard tackle. And then we played him at right tackle his rookie year. And then we started to switch him over to guard, and then he gets hurt. And then it was like, we moved him from one guard to another guard spot, and all that positional instability you have as a young player getting moved. And especially on the offensive line, that's a hard spot, especially on the interior. So much is asked of you and there's so much demand. And I think a lot of people think like, well, he can play center, so he can play guard, or he can play guard, so he can play center. He just has to snap the ball. Like, there's just different responsibilities. There's different technique. There's different movement. And very interesting point to note that on Ruiz and how his, growth has been. And sticking with that offensive line, the Bills last week shredded by the Indianapolis Colts, who have a terrific offensive line. They really mixed it up with gap and zone runs. They used a lot of trap and whams and just ran right at the Bills and ran it down their throats. The Saints coming into this game have run 75 gap runs and 184 zone, which is decently, quote unquote, balanced given today's NFL, where a lot of teams like to run zone. What kind of attack do you see from the Saints on the ground coming into this game? I know a lot of it's going to depend on if Mark Ingram's healthy and who you're running there in the backfield, but what kind of running attack do you anticipate for the Saints coming out this game?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, to your point, is like, what is Ingram going to be healthy? I think with Ingram the last couple of weeks, the Saints have tried to go with a gap look. They've tried to stick between the tackles a lot. I think Kamara just being out changes a lot of what they want to do. I will say, though, you mentioned the zone. I think Taysom Hill's usage is going to be one of the elements to just figure out, because he didn't play at all last week. He was active, but because Ian Book was inactive, he was technically the only backup quarterback they had. And, there's that nightmare scenario. If he gets hurt on a play that Simeon gets hurt, it's like, okay, well, who's the quarterback? But I think for him, if he plays, then I think that's where the Saints are going to be able to get their zone game going, because that has not been going. And part of it's, you don't have Alvin Kamara out there right now. And the other part is, Mark Ingram just, traditionally running between the tackles right now has actually looked pretty good. And that's why I think the Saints are going to probably stick with that if they can. But I'm really interested to see how Taysom Hill looks in this game, because he was limited last week. Now he's a full participant. So if you're going by the injury report, then there really is no excuse for him not to be an active player in Thursday's game, particularly running the football. And again, it's gonna stink for people watching who want to see fireworks per se on Thursday night. But if the Saints are going to have success, it is those power QB runs that they love to run, those option runs where Taysom's going to snap the ball, the fullback's going to be in motion, rolling right or rolling left, and that's going to be his lead blocker. And if they can do that, they'll slow down the game a little bit, which is what they're going to want to do regardless. But I'm very curious. I think they're going to mix it up. I think you will see both running attacks, but I think a lot of it is also predicated on Mark Ingram. If he's not there, then I think they might just go all out zone with Taysom Hill and then Tony Jones Jr. from Notre Dame.
It's such a huge piece for this game. Again, like the Bills just got shredded by the Colts, and you see what the Saints are capable of with a brilliant offensive mind like Sean Payton. And the way they attack the Bills, we're going to get to the passing game of the offense in a little while, but that running game, that initial piece to try and make things easier for Trevor Simeon and what they can do in both, like you mentioned, gap and zone, but then so much of that window dressing, the jet motions they throw, the orbit motions they throw, adding the Taysom Hill wrinkle in there in terms of, is it going to be a little wildcat or option look? Is it just going to be a straight QB power, QB sweep? Taysom Hill, I know he gets a ton of flack because, of how he throws, and he's a quarterback and so on and so forth, but he's really a phenomenal athlete. He runs behind his pads really well. Like, he's fast, and I think people know that, but he can deliver some pop when he runs. Like, I think that's a very legitimate, like, just snap him the ball, lead him up through the hole with fullback or H-back or whatever you want to do, use that extra blocker piece. Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, like in storyline to watch. So very glad that you touched on that. Let's flip to the other line. Let's the Saints defensive line for a little bit. So we already mentioned Marcus Davenport out and Passanio out and Peyton Turner, and Cam Jordan is still there, and they still have some other guys there. But we've seen this Bills offensive line, a lot of inconsistency. Spencer Brown, a rookie that the Bills got in the third round, the talk all offseason was like, well, he's really raw. He really could be something in like 2 or 3 years. All of a sudden, he's become kind of like the savior for the offense because of his athleticism, what he's done up front. And that's largely because, credit to him, not to take anything away from him, but that Bills offensive line has just been very inconsistent, especially on the interior. They're banged up now. Even when they're at their healthiest, it's still not great. So given the injuries that the Saints have on that defensive line and who they're going to be trotting out there, do you see the Saints defensive line versus the Bills O-line as a plus matchup for the Saints? And how do you see that battle kind of going, both in terms of the pass and the run?
I think if Marcus Davenport was in, it was going to be a plus. And that was something that I was trying to talk about on my podcast yesterday. And I could kind of sense it that it was not seeming like he was going to play, which is very unfortunate because Davenport last 3 games alone, 4.5 sacks in those. And he has just been a guy who everyone's waiting for him to turn it on. And he finally did turn it on. And of course, now he's hurt, which is really unfortunate. Right now, I'm honestly going to say it's even in the sense that I think David Onyemata is the guy who people might not highlight going into this game. But if the Saints are going to make some noise in the trenches, that's going to be the guy that needs to make a difference because when he's at full strength and when he's playing his best football, he could just be a monster in the middle. And that's what the Saints are going to need because, like you mentioned, Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson, you're going to rely on those guys to play 50, 60 snaps. I don't know how they're going to look after as the game goes on. They'll probably be winded. So you're going to need a guy in the middle who isn't going to play every snap, but when he's on the field, needs to be active. I'm going to look at that. I think run defense-wise, I'm going to give the Saints a plus there over the Bills. I just think even with Marcus Davenport out, the Saints do enough at the second level with Pete Werner and Demario Davis and Quan Alexander. I think they have enough firepower there. The weird thing is, though, about the run game real quick, the Saints, for some reason, can't figure out the read option that the Eagles have had. The last 2 to 3 years, they've only given up 2 games where they've given up at least 200 yards rushing. Both games came to the Eagles.
I forgot about the one last year, too. They had the huge Miles Sanders run. Yeah.
It is absurd. And I do wonder, though, if you're the Bills, did you look at that tape and were there things that you can grab out of it? Because you do have an athletic quarterback. You can get RPOs, implemented the offense if you want to. I think that's where it would shift. If the Bills are going to kind of keep it to a traditional run game, I think that's where the Saints have the plus. But if they start going towards the option, that's where I'm scared about the Saints because they showed against Philly they could not stop it.
I love that you mentioned that. Philly's attack the last several weeks, they've really shifted big time. They started out and just, let's drop Jalen Hurts back like 50 times a game, which everybody was like, what are you doing? Why aren't we running the ball? Especially with Miles Sanders before he got hurt. And then almost the game that Sanders got hurt against the Raiders, they started to run the ball more. They've continued that trend. And they just outgapped the Saints so much last week and took advantage with that option offense and just wasting the edge rushers, running the ball inside. They put the Saints corners in disadvantageous scenarios and made them have to be the ones to tackle and fill, or they were trying to use formations to pull Demario Davis away from the center of the field in the box. And that's very, I totally forgot about the game last year too and how they had success with that. And that's a thing. The Bills run a lot of RPOs, especially in the red zone. I wonder if they scale to that as well, like you mentioned, because of how well it works for Philadelphia and how the Bills running has been tough for them in a variety of forms and facets, no matter what running back they use, although Matt Breida has been better the last several weeks and added a bit of a spark. But I think that Josh Allen run game, whether it's RPOs or read options or design QB sweeps and powers, it has to be a part of the game plan, considering the success that Philly has had and considering how thin the Saints are up front. And I mean, with Davenport and Passanio being out, that's 9 sacks and 35 pressures that are gone. And Davenport leading the team with 5 sacks. And you mentioned some of the pass rush piece there. This one was a really interesting one. So the Saints use the most 3-man rushes from a snap percentage standpoint at 21% in the NFL, and they use 4-man rushes on 57%. So 78% of the time, they're either coming with 4 or they're coming with 3. How much of that is just a straight 4-man rush, or are they bringing some simulated pressures? You mentioned some of the pass rush with Pete Werner, who's been really good this year. Demario Davis can blitz. How does that pass rush look? Are they playing games, with Dennis Allen as their defensive coordinator? What are they trying to do, considering they don't really blitz a lot and they usually just bring 4 or 3, but do they vary it up, and what can we expect to see from that?
Funny enough, a lot of the times it really depends as to who's out there. Lately, though, it's kind of just been a traditional 4, which ironically comes in that 3-game losing streak where they haven't gotten that creative, but a lot of it also has to do with personnel. And one guy who's been out for this game because he's on IR, CJ Gardner-Johnson, who everyone loves in terms of he's going to cause a scene some way or another. He's the guy where you will see sometimes they'll have what looks like a 3-man rush and he'll come off the corner as a blitz and that'll be your 4th guy. Or there will be times where you have Demario Davis coming in. But actually, since the Seattle Monday night game, Demario Davis's usage as a free blitzer just hasn't been happening. And I don't know what the reason behind that is. I don't know if the Saints feel comfortable with where they're at or if they think he's too important to kind of move up there, which I think they're going to have to use him in situations like that on Thursday if they're going to generate any pressure. But yeah, lately it's been just kind of a traditional 4-man rush. But when the Saints are at their best, it's when they find a way with that 3-man rush. They actually had a lot of success with it against Tampa Bay. So again, I don't know if that changes now that Davenport's out. I think it definitely will. But for some reason, Dennis Allen went from week 8, where everyone said he was going to get a head coaching job, and I was like all over it. I was like, yeah, he deserves one. Where now the defense does look a little simplistic now, and maybe it's losing your Davenports and your Gardner Johnsons and your Peyton Turners. It could be that, which is definitely possible. But it is odd. He's not getting as exotic, I would say, with his scheme right now. It's been very straightforward.
That exotic piece, that this was a really cool one that I kind of anticipated just from seeing a bunch of Saints games, but 6 of their top 9 snap counts on defense belong to defensive backs. Malcolm Jenkins is first. Marcus Williams is third. Lattimore is fourth. Paulson Adebo is sixth. Gardner Johnson is seventh. And then PJ Williams is 9. We're going to get into some coverage things from the Saints defense in just a minute, but to talk about that a little bit, because the Bills are a traditional nickel defense. That nickel is base. Taron Johnson is basically like a linebacker in terms of how he fills and comes up. So you're always seeing 5 defensive backs on the field for the Bills. But the Saints take that to another level in terms of their formations. They'll sometimes only put like one true lineman down in Cam Jordan and then just have a bunch of linebackers and defensive backs on the field. Talk about how Dennis Allen likes to use his defensive backs and what that kind of looks like now that Gardner Johnson is out.
Yeah, I think Dennis Allen talked about it after the Bucs game. He mentioned a lot about how offenses are getting out there in terms of what they're going to do in the pass, and he loves the DB room that they have. And I think when you're able to hit home with 3, it gives them the luxury of dropping more guys back in coverage. But I think also a lot of it has to do with play your best players. And I think for the Saints, it just so happens that a lot of their best players are DBs and they want to play to their strengths. And luckily enough, you mentioned some of the guys like PJ Williams and CJ Gardner Johnson, and those are guys who classify as corners. But honestly, they really are just playmakers, I would say. They're hybrid type guys who, yeah, you could say they're a nickel corner, but I could also tell you, honestly, both of them can play free safety if they wanted to. I think they're versatile enough to do that, and I think that really helps them out. And on the other hand, it's also a point where Malcolm Jenkins is getting a little bit older. He's not able to do the things that he used to do in coverage. You can move him in the box, kind of make him kind of like a linebacker, and someone can take his place moving back in that secondary, and that allows them to get a little bit more versatile, which I love. But I will throw this out here real quick before you talk about coverages and stuff. I wish I knew what the reason was, but going into this game, ever since week 8, we have not seen the same Marshawn Lattimore, and I don't know if that's because the Saints are getting a little too soft with their coverages, which is definitely a problem of late, but this is the matchup that I'm watching because it's going to go up against Stephon Diggs. Saints fans can't stand Stephon Diggs. Not his fault that he made that great play for Minnesota, but it is a matchup to watch. But yes, the Saints are going to get really creative with it. You're going to see a lot of PJ Williams on Thursday night, and you're going to see some weird things. I actually think PJ Williams, you talk about getting creative with bringing pressure. That might be a guy who has to blitz off the corner and come off free. So that's someone to watch too as well.
You mentioned some of the soft coverages. So the Saints, pretty varied actually in a decent amount of their snaps, but 41% man coverage was the second most in the NFL, 44% zone. So they're decently close in those. The Bills traditionally, especially last year, have eaten man coverage alive. Teams this year have really stepped up the amount of zone coverage that they're showing Josh Allen. They're playing a lot of cover 2 or 2 high safety looks and just playing zone. Do you see the Saints going with that, and leading in with that with Lattimore and how they've been playing softer recently? Or do you see them trying to go back to a bit more of their roots and getting up in the Bills receivers' faces, going aggressive, going man coverage? What do you anticipate from a coverage standpoint in this game?
Yeah, I think early on, I think they're going to be aggressive. And I think it's crazy to say, but the Saints have had an issue with Lattimore in the sense that he needs to get up for these matchups. Like these are the matchups that he's ready for. Like if he sees that he's going up against an elite wide receiver, that's when he wants to play. And it's the times where you're going up against a lesser name, like a Russell Gage from an Atlanta, where it's like, all right, this guy seems like he's a little lazy right now. And it's actually been something that he's admit to. He says sometimes he doesn't get himself going. So I think early on, I think the Saints are going to try and be aggressive and start off with man. One, to see how that matchup fares between Diggs and Lattimore, because hypothetically speaking, if the Saints have a chance at pulling off the upset, they're going to need to limit Diggs's productivity, I would say.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to watch. If it doesn't work out early, though, I think the Saints immediately have to drop back into zone and figure out their scheme there. But they can't do what they did last week. They did a lot of single high safety last week. And I think you can do single high safety against Jalen Hurts because I love Jalen Hurts, but he's not a passing quarterback. He's learning to do that. Josh Allen will kill you on that in terms of shredding the defense if you're going to go single high safety. And it's a difference between Jalen Hurts reaching the other side of the field versus Josh Allen being able to rip it and zip it into the corner, because there were moments where Marcus Williams made a great break on the ball and people said, look at the range. And it was great range, but I think Josh Allen could squeeze those passes in there because he could get more velocity on the football. So I think the Saints are going to have to drop someone back. I don't know if that's going to be Malcolm Jenkins or they're going to keep him closer. I also am worried about Malcolm Jenkins' matchup with Dawson Knox because he has been traditionally covering tight ends this year. He did struggle against Goddard last week. I'm a big fan of Dawson Knox, so I'll see how that goes there. But I think for the Saints, you start off man. You see how it goes very early because you're going to have to make a quick decision because with the Saints offense and how poorly they're playing, 2 bad drives, the game could be over. Like that's how much of a struggle it's been offensively speaking to put up points that aren't in garbage time. So start off man, see how it goes after the opening drive or 2. And then I would scale back to zone if it's not working. The Saints do have the athletes to cover. I think we're going to see Bradley Roby out there. Obviously, Paulson Adebo will be out there. But it's going to be fascinating for sure.
You mentioned the single high looks that they showed Hurts last week, obviously in response to bringing another guy in the box and around the line of scrimmage to try and defend that, run game. Traditionally for, this year for the Saints, they have the 9th highest usage percentage of coverages with the middle of the field open. So cover 2, cover 4, cover 0, cover 6 with 161. They're in a 2-high pre-snap shell 54% of the time. They are, as I follow my notes here, I have notes like literally all over. If you could see, like I need like 20 screens in front of me. And what's also interesting, so 2-high coverages and everything I mentioned, they've also had 7 or less defenders in the box on 78% of their snaps, with 53% of snaps being with 6-man boxes or less. Usually, light box, it's hard to defend against the run. Not so much for the Saints. They are the number 1 rush defense in terms of DVOA. They're giving up the 3rd least amount of rushing yards per game. How is this defense fitting the run and attacking the run? And how do they hold up against it, given the fact that they like to go with 2 high looks and they like to show light boxes, which traditionally is harder to defend the run with?
I think a lot of it comes down to having 2 elite run defenders on the defensive line. Onyemata and Cam Jordan are still at the top of their game in terms of stopping the run, which is funny because Saints fans get on Cam Jordan's case because he is slowing down in terms of getting after the quarterback, but he's also towards the tail end of his career, and you understand why. But in terms of run game, Cam Jordan sheds his blocks very easily in that department. He's been outstanding, but it's also the second level in terms of what they're able to do. Demario Davis is a great run defender. He just comes down like a heat-seeking missile, in my opinion. And then Pete Werner has done a great job of keeping everything in front of him, which was the struggle for the Saints post Quan Alexander's injury last year. They had Alex Anzalone in. They were moving around, and there were so many times where a simple assignment was just getting blown. You're not doing that with Pete Werner. Now, Pete Werner might not flash. He might not be the most athletic guy on the field, but there have been times, whether it's against the Giants and Saquon Barkley, or even times against the Atlanta Falcons with Cordell Patterson, where we've seen Pete Werner make outstanding plays where it looks like the runner might break off a 10, 15-yard run, and it really ends up being only 3 because Pete Werner's an excellent surefire tackler. Quan Alexander's another guy I'll throw out there real quick too. He is so hit or miss that I think there's going to be a play in this game that's going to dictate how that one's going to go. He lately has done a great job of being a surefire tackler. That's usually not the case. He usually does, kind of, I would say, over pursued his guy, and that's going to be interesting to watch. But the Saints are just very fortunate that their front 5, particularly the front 4 that they have, and then just include Demario Davis in there, have been able to be just so sound in the run game. But a lot of it starts with David Onyemata clogging up the middle, and then Cam Jordan doing a good job of setting the edge.
If you're this Bills offense and you are attacking the Saints defense in this game, how are you doing it? Is it through the run? And if so, are you trying to use option and things that the Eagles did? Or are you coming out and trying to pass it? How are you going to attack the Saints if you're the Bills?
Yeah, I think for starters, I'm running towards the left side because I think Carl Granderson, one thing he does struggle with is run defense because he really is a third down pass rusher, in my opinion. He's a situational defensive end, but now he's got to be a starter for this game because of the injuries on the D-line. So if I'm the Bills, 1, I'm trying to wear him down, and 2, I'm trying to see how does he hold up against the run? How do the Saints kind of respond to that if you are attacking that left side of the defense? Now, if that doesn't work, I think regardless, the RPO has got to get involved here because the Eagles really did just pick apart the Saints. And the only times the Saints had success against the Eagles in terms of defense was late in the game. Eagles took their foot off the gas, which was pretty clear for me watching it. And that's where they had their success. But I think if they go out, they have this RPOs going out, I think they'll be fine. I don't know if just passing all over the Saints will end up being the answer because the Saints have enough firepower in the secondary to, I'm not going to say make them pay, but at least to hold their own. But I think if they can get the run started early and get the RPO involved, I think that you're going to have guys start cheating up a little bit. And when that happens, like I said, Josh Allen has the arm to make you pay for that. And I know it's been an inconsistent season at times for him, but I still think the Josh Allen of 2020 is still somewhere in there. And I think for the Saints, that's going to be the key. If you can make Buffalo one-dimensional and Buffalo can kind of, for some reason, not go with RPOs, I would say great. But I would be shocked to think that Coach Dable looked at the tape from last week for the Saints and goes, yeah, we're not going to use anything that the Eagles had success with. That would be foolish in my opinion. So I think running to the left side, wearing down Granderson, keeping things away from Cam Jordan if they can, and then using the RPO game to kind of open it up would be my ideal situation for the Bills.
Yeah, so much of this offense this year is always circling back to Josh Allen, and like the easiest straight path fix is, well, if Josh Allen goes back to balling out, then everything will be fine. But it's been hard for him given how defenses are playing him with the too high and all the zone looks and everything like that, and how many they're dropping and playing cover two and so on and so forth. And so the run game has been talked about so much as kind of alleviating some of that offensive struggle and opening up more things for Josh and being able to take advantage. You know, we saw what the Bills did against the Jets. They went with a lot of heavier personnel and they went with formations that would make the Jets have to bring down another safety. So they got single high looks and then they went play action all day and just took advantage of in breakers and crossers and going over the middle. But if they can't do that, it's tough. And we're talking about Josh Allen. Now let's flip it to the other side here with Trevor Simeon, third string quarterback. Bills fans saw him when he played for the Denver Broncos. I think all things considered, he's played pretty decent. His touchdown throw, the first touchdown against Philly, was maybe bad defense if you want to go, but it was just on the money pinpoint to Troutman. And I was like, oh my God, look at that throw by Trevor Simeon. But nonetheless, Trevor Simeon leading this offense, Kamara out, their best weapon, a little deficient on the outside. Actually, Adam Troutman is also out now. We talked about the injuries up front. What's going on with the Saints offense? What do you expect to see from them against the Bills?
I think they're going to try and run as much as they can. I think the last couple of weeks, the Saints kind of convinced themselves that they're just going to be a distributing offense in the sense that short pass here, short pass there, and we'll move the chains methodically and figure it out. And it doesn't work. It's just not working because A, they don't have the receivers, B, they don't have the quarterback, and now you don't really have the O-line to do it either. So you're really just hitting every box at this point. But I think for the Saints, a lot of it is starting off with the run. They're going to need to have success. If they don't have success running the football, it will be a long day for them. And that's going to be key there. And then two, you talked about the window dressing. I'm very interested to see what the Saints do with Malcolm Perry. They claimed him, or not claimed him, they signed him after he cleared waivers. I don't know if he will be called up for this game. But the Saints have had so many guys not do anything this year in terms of they were expecting more out of them and they haven't shown up. And I wonder if a gadget player like that, there's a player or two that Sean Payton says, you know what, maybe he can do something there. I think that's interesting to watch. The Saints' usage of Deontay Harris, not a good game for him against Darius Slay. And that kind of makes sense. Darius Slay's had a fantastic season. But I think for the Saints, whether it's an end around here, a quick wide receiver screen, get the ball in his hands early, let him kind of feel like he's that return man in open space and figure out a way to get him going because he's the only receiver the Saints have that I would say poses a threat to other defenses simply because he has that speed that could take the top off of a defense. But they also don't have the O-line right now to hold up to take those deep shots. So that's why I would work on a screen, maybe a quick crossing route, something that could get the ball in his hands quickly and let him make a play. But it all starts with the run, and they're going to need to use Taysom Hill. If this is a game where Taysom Hill's sitting on the bench, I would say it's going to be a Buffalo win for sure. And if the Saints are going to pull something miraculous out, they're going to need Taysom Hill to get at least 10 touches. Like that's how important I think Taysom Hill is for this game. And I'll be honest, going into this matchup, I thought the Saints actually would switch it up at quarterback. I thought they would actually put Taysom Hill in because they've been in such a funk. I thought they would say, you know what? We need some type of spark. And even if it doesn't work, what's the worst thing? You go back to Simeon. I don't think Simeon's going to be offended if they give the ball back to him after benching him. He's been through it. He's a journeyman quarterback. You're not doing that, which either makes me think they're not going to give him a large role in this game, or there actually is a large package for Taysom Hill. It's one or the other at this point. He will not be the starter, though.
Yeah.
But I think they need to use a lot of Taysom Hill. He is their best weapon now that Kamara's out. And again, I don't know that you're going to be able to pass on the Bills, even if you had a potent offense, and the Saints don't have one right now. So it's got to be a lot of run. I'm not saying go full on Navy offense, but they got money here on Thursday night for sure.
That's a beautiful segue to last question. Then, we'll get you out of here. The Bills go with a lot of disguise coverages. That's why it's the name of this show. No pun intended. I say it accidentally so much that now I feel like I have to work it in on purpose now. But they go light boxes. They go with 2 high coverages pre-snap and then actually post-snap. And they rotate and they spin safeties and they rock Hyde and Poyer back and forth. And they do all these things. You mentioned the running game being a key for the Saints. If you are the Bills, are you playing single high and crowding that box and making Trevor Simeon beat you, or are you sticking to what you do traditionally in terms of playing quarters and what you like to do for the Bills? So are you trying to do one of those things, or how would you attack the Saints offense and try and shut them down if you're the Bills defense?
I would actually kind of stick it to traditional what they've been doing, because I think for Trevor Simeon, the one thing he has done well is I've noticed in garbage time, there are times where I specifically the Titans game, they were up 20-6 at the time, and they started cheating their safeties up a little bit. And there was a nice wheel route throw that Simeon had. He had another throw down the seam to Traquan Smith. And there were moments where I was like, okay, he's not going to be Jameis and throw it 40, 50 yards down the field with ease. But you know what? If you're going to give him that opportunity, we will take that chance. So if I'm the Bills, I'm not getting too cute with it. And I do think, like I mentioned with Deontay Harris, that's a guy where it really only takes one mistake where all of a sudden he's down the field. And if Simeon hits him, maybe the Saints can get a cheap 7 there, which they've been struggling to do. So I would kind of keep it there. I think the Eagles did a great job of doing 2 things. I thought the pressure that they brought on Simeon was crucial. And most importantly, their star corner locked up the Saints' best receiver. The Bills certainly have a corner capable of locking up the Saints' best receiver. And when that happens to Simeon, that throws everything off. And I'll throw this out there too to mention why I would not worry about the single high safety and I would go with the traditional look. There was a great freeze frame from the All-22 film where every Saints receiver is pretty much locked up. They have 0 separation. Simeon's not throwing. Simeon pump fakes on that still. The next picture is a split second after the pump fake. You see if anything changes, nothing changes. So I would not change a thing if I were the Bills in terms of getting too cute with it. I think this Saints offense they don't have the firepower right now. And it sucks because I have to just be brutally honest and blunt about it. But I'm not going to give the Saints a chance to have a deep bomb to Deontay Harris or get super creative with maybe Malcolm Perry if he's active. I wouldn't give them that chance, because you give a team like that some life, maybe their defense gets going. That's how you could get upset in a game like this. So I would keep it traditional.
Chris, you were phenomenal. I know we kept you a couple minutes over our initial agreed to time, but you were a pro's pro in every way. Super insightful, great insight, great knowledge, breakdowns, everything like that. 1, thank you so much for stopping by. You were awesome. 2, why don't you tell all the good people where they can find you? I always love to encourage Bills fans to go out and try and learn as much about football as possible. And in doing that is following people of other teams to stay up on other schemes, concepts, and teams in general, just to know what's up. So let everybody know where they can find you and what you do and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you for inviting me on the show. I really appreciate it. The Bills, you mentioned liking the Saints. I'll just throw this out there real quick. The pizzeria that I always go to, the guy who owns it, because I'm actually a New York guy. It's the way I fell in love with the Saints was just weird, but the pizzeria that I always went to, the guy who owns it's a Bills fan. And I love awesome. The dude. He's such a nice guy. So I just developed not my second team, but I was always like, hey, if the Saints don't win, I wouldn't mind if the Bills win. That's kind of been a team that I've always had respect for. So nice. I appreciate you having me on. So people can follow me on Twitter at Rosvoglu Report, ROSVOGLOU Report. They can check out my work at The Spun and also Sports Illustrated. And then my Straight Up Saints podcast for Boot Crew Media. It's not sounding too optimistic the last couple of weeks with the way they played, but again, we all love our teams to a fault. So we do what we do.
We love our team super hard. And it's funny that both of us kind of come into this game being like, everything's on fire and it's all terrible. And one of us is going to come out of this game being like, okay, you know what? I feel pretty good. And the other one is going to be like, nope, it's all worse. And we're just going to nosedive even further. But yeah, Chris, you were awesome. Thank you so much for coming by and take care. And maybe we'll see you around again someday.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too, man. What a fantastic guest. Again, we've been rolling on this streak here on Disguise coverage of just quality guest after quality guest. Make sure you go out there and give Chris a follow. Check him out. His work is good. His written work is good. His tweets are good. His pod is good. Again, it's nice to have people who are knowledgeable about other teams and be able to stay up on those other teams, one from an opponent standpoint. So that way, when you come into a matchup with an opponent, you kind of know what's up already because you've been following and keeping some kind of tabs on them. It's always good to have that. But two, it's just good to consume more NFL content if you like the NFL and if you like football and be able to stay up on what's going on. And even if you like the Bills more than you like the NFL, that's completely fine. The Bills might do some of the stuff that the Saints will do right now. Maybe one day the Bills are doing some things on defense that the Saints have done, so on and so forth, or on offense, vice versa, whatever have you. And you're familiar with it because you've already been keeping tabs from somebody like Chris Vogel. So awesome stuff from him. He touched on it. A lot of the points for this game, I loved his point, and Puka came and commented on it and said, that's good advice, quote unquote, don't get too cute. I hope the Bills don't get too cute in this one. I don't think they need to. I don't think Trevor Simeon and what he can do, Chris touched on it. He's not somebody that's going to threaten the Bills tremendously. I love what he mentioned, though, about the potential of Mark Ingram playing and Taysom Hill playing. Eric Turner and I in the film room last night with Eric Wood. Awesome watch, awesome listen. Go and check that out on the Cover One YouTube channel or on any of the podcasting apps and platforms. Go check that out. We broke down how physical the Colts offensive line was against the Bills defense and how they used the Bills one gapping and penetration and upfield mobility and movement against them in that game. And real quick comment here from Jason, who said, when you bring on a Pats guy, make sure he's not an annoying homer. I'm trying to work on something different for the Bills Patriots week next week. I'm aiming for it not to be a Pats guy. I'm aiming for it to be someone special. So fingers crossed on that, because I find a lot of Pats guys to be absolute homers. So it's tough, but I'm right there with you, Jason. I think it's interesting to go back to what Chris mentioned, that straight ahead running attack from the Saints. I mentioned earlier, again, if you guys see me looking off screens, because I'm looking at notes and everything. So the Saints coming into this week, 75 gap runs, 184 zone. Again, as I mentioned, in an NFL where last year there were over 9,000 zone runs and roughly 3,000 gap runs, which is a crazy amount of dwarfing going on there. Having 184 zone to 75 gap runs for that ratio for the Saints, that's, again, like I mentioned earlier, that's decently balanced. So, and I mentioned last week, the Colts, Jonathan Taylor in particular, had 99 zone runs and 57 gap runs. So Taylor was a guy that was versatile, a Colts offensive line that was versatile. The Saints now, they lose a little bit of that versatility because they don't have Alvin Kamara, but they have a hammer in Mark Ingram who is still able to get downfield in a hurry. He gets the physical yards. He gets the tough yards. And Chris talked about how good Eric McCoy is in the center and how up and down Cesar Ruiz can be. But if those guys are both clicking, they have, I should say, an opportunity to potentially replicate what the Colts did last week. Now, I know, I recognize that's a bit of a stretch because Jonathan Taylor is playing at an MVP level, and the Colts offensive line holistically, especially now with the injuries to the Saints, is much better than the Saints line is. But that straight ahead running style, I think that's going to be the key for the Saints coming into this game, especially if they use Taysom Hill. Like Chris said, again, in a traditional run, quarterback's handing off the ball. So that's one less person that can do something on that play. Quarterback hands off the ball, he's out of the play. That leaves 10 other offensive players against the 11 on defense. So in theory, that's an advantage, 11 versus 10. But if the quarterback keeps the ball and runs on a design run and the running back is blocking for him, all of a sudden you've evened your odds and made it an even matchup. So that straight ahead running potential of the Saints, combined with the speed of Taysom Hill, if they use him in that regard, I am very, 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 very intrigued to see what the Saints do on offense. And I think that's the key to the whole thing. I do not think this is a game, like Chris said, where Trevor Simeon's going to come out and corrected Jason in the comments there saying that Edmonds is playing, I believe, should help 1,000%. Tremaine Edmonds will help a lot in this defense, despite the fact that some people think he's not as good as AJ Klein. But you cannot let Trevor Simeon beat you. And I don't think Trevor Simeon will beat you. He is a guy who can function in the offense. Sean Payton's going to do a good job of scheming things around him and trying to set him up for success. But if the Saints get the running game going, that's going to be so helpful to them. And that is, at the end of the day, the key for the Bills defense. Stop the run. That's it. I don't necessarily think they need to bring a safety down in the box in order to do that, but if they do, I think they can get away with it. I think their corners are strong enough on the outside to hold up, but again, to Chris's point, something that I continue to say, if you do have to crowd the box and play more aggressive to sell out for the run, you open yourself up to the big play for some of the speedster weapons and gadget guys that the Saints have. So that's going to be a huge one. That Bills defense against that Saints run, and I'm not just saying it because of, what happened last week against the Colts, but this particular matchup, this is not a plus matchup for the Saints passing offense against the Bills passing defense. So that's going to be a very intriguing one from that perspective. And just throw out some more notes here for the Bills. Oh, I already spoke on that, so we're going to switch sides of the ball. We're going to go to the Saints defense against the Bills offense. This one's really intriguing as a whole. I mentioned again, the Bills have been seeing a lot of too high coverages. They've been seeing a lot of zone coverage. And I mentioned some things for the Saints in terms of how majority of the time they are in 4-man rushes or less, and they lead the league in percentage of snaps with 3-man rushes. They're 31st in the NFL in 4-man pressures with 63. So they've only generated 63 pressures with a 4-man rush. The Bills have generated 121 pressures with a 4-man rush, and that's third in the entire NFL. The Saints come into this game 15th in combined sacks with 23. They're also 15th in sacks per game at 2.3. But again, they're going to be missing 9 sacks in this game with Passanio out and Marcus Davenport out. That's 9 sacks, 5 for Davenport, 4 for Passanio that are gone. 39 pressures between the two of them that are gone. They are 28th in pressure percentage up front. The Bills are second with a measure of 46.3. Saints, again, are 28th in pressure percentage at 35.4. The Saints have 11 players with 1 sack or more. The Bills, for reference, have 13, but no one has more than 3 sacks. So mentioned all these things. They also have a 24% blitz percentage, which is towards the bottom of the league. So again, they're rushing 4, they're rushing 3, they're playing coverage behind it. They've run man coverage 41% of the time, which is the second most in the league. They've run zone coverage 44% of the time. They're in a 2-high shell pre-snap 54% of the time, and they have the 9th highest usage percentage of coverage snaps with the middle of the field being open. So 2 high safeties or cover 0. Again, middle of the field open, no single high there. Very interested to see what the Saints do against the Buffalo Bills. And to Devin's comment here, going back to, he said that's what the Bills need to do, especially after seeing Hurts run all day on the Saints. He was going back to a comment earlier about how the Bills need to attack the Saints defense and with Josh Allen. This is going to be a really intriguing one. Again, we continue to say this week after week, but it honestly is. The NFL is a matchup league, right? Whether it's a good matchup or a bad matchup. Every single week. Last week, it happened to be a bad matchup. There were a multitude of factors that went into that. But it is a matchup league. And how you adjust and how you play chess against your opponent. Jason's comment here. Sorry, nobody on our D had more than 3 sacks through 10 games. Did I hear that right? Correct. Gregory Rousseau is tied for first with 3 sacks, and Mario Addison is tied. The other person tied with him with 3. Jerry Hughes leads the team in pressures, but he only has 2 sacks. But Jerry Hughes has been fantastic. Don't get completely blown away by sacks. This is, for a majority of the year, they've been the number 1 defense in terms of DVOA, and that's without getting a lot of sacks. And part of that is because they have the 3rd most pressures with a 4-man rush. So sacks aren't everything. They're doing it in other ways. And to Spin's comment here, if Ed Oliver was 1 step faster this season, he would have 10 sacks himself. That's kind of fair, I feel, for Ed Oliver. It's getting a little frustrating for him. But we have that chess match every single week, right? Because what you do good this week, you might not be able to do next week because maybe the team is better at defending that than they are defending something else. So maybe you need to change it up. That's just one example. There's so many chess matches that happen on a week-to-week basis, in-game, pre-game, preparation, drive to drive, quarter to quarter, all of that. And we saw what happened last week with the Eagles. I mentioned it earlier. They outgapped the hell out of the Saints defense. When I say outgapped, I mean they created more gaps than the defense could defend and account for and be able to force things inside or spill and come up and contain. And they did that with that option run. Jalen Hurts over 60 yards rushing, Jordan Howard over 60 yards rushing, Miles Sanders had over 90. Jalen Hurts had 18 carries. They really ran that option offense. Now, I'm not saying the Bills should do that. I think Jalen Hurts is a different type of quarterback and built differently physically. He's built almost like a running back. I don't want to run Josh 20 times a game. I think Hurts you can. One, because I think you need to, given his deficiency in reading defenses and progression and getting to reads late. Josh is much more advanced and much better in that area. But Jalen Hurts runs like a running back. He is a tank. He can put his shoulder down and truck guys. He's much more agile. Josh is athletic, but Jalen Hurts is a running back who can throw, which is good for him and good for some fantasy football owners. So I'm not out here saying the Bills need to run every single play, but I think that option offense, and like Chris mentioned, bringing in some more RPOs is a very intriguing piece because it worked a lot. That zone read worked a lot. That option offense, RPOs, it worked very well last week for Philadelphia. And again, I know that's one game, but that's something going back to what Philadelphia did last year with a different coaching staff that also worked well. So that's showing something that the Saints are potentially vulnerable to. It's something the Bills can do. And when you've got somewhat plus advantages on the outside, especially if Cole Beasley is healthier going into this game, I think that's a big thing to attack because we continue to see defenses, again, as we mentioned, playing too high coverages, dropping back and playing zone. The Colts this past week played a lot of cover two. They didn't even do a crazy, unique or creative version of cover two. They were just straight spot dropping in their zone. When I say spot dropping, I literally mean like the coverage diagram. When you learn the play, it says like, okay, line up at 7 yards, drop to 12. That's all they were doing. They were spot dropping. The Bills got down early. Josh Allen tried to press. It worked into the Colts' favor, so on and so forth. That's also a big thing I want to mention too. Greg Thompson mentioned it on the Cover One post game with the Bills being front runners. When the Bills get down, this is the thing now at this point. When the Bills get down, Josh Allen starts to press. When Josh Allen starts to press, this team starts to press because this team gets their energy and their attitude from Josh Allen. They feed off of him positively or negatively. That is 1,000% a thing. And to illustrate that, I have a really fun metric. I tweeted it out earlier today. So the New Orleans Saints defense, their second half DVOA rating for their defense, they're 4th. And late or in close games, their DVOA is 7th. The Bills offense, second half offensive DVOA, they're 17th. And their late and close DVOA for the offense, 28th. This offense starts to press when they get down, and they press because of how Josh Allen operates. He wants it. He goes after it. He competes really hard. He tries too hard at certain times. We call it the sugar high Josh type of thing. But he starts to press too much. That works in a very heavy favor for a defense that is just playing zone coverage because you've got more guys out there in the field. You've got guys who can squeeze down gaps and squeeze down windows. And when you have a quarterback who's trying to fit the ball into these windows that you're squeezing down, you have the opportunity for more incompletions, pass breakups, and interceptions. I think the Bills need to get out early on the Saints. They cannot get down. They cannot allow this team, in terms of themselves, to get into a state where they have to start pressing and they get into a state where Josh feels like, okay, I got to make a play. Okay, I got to make a play. And you combine that with the pass rush he's seen and the lack of protection for him and how he's getting skittish in the pocket. And they're running things more vertical to attack these cover two zones and in zones in general. They're getting some routes up the seam and up the sideline. But Josh either isn't getting the time. In actuality, he's getting rushed and he has to dump it off, or there's some pressure generated and he's getting skittish and thinking like, uh-oh, I'm going to get hit again. I have to escape the pocket and make a play. There's a lot of things that are, when you add them all together, they are some of the parts type of thing. It's the reason why we've seen these struggles from the Bills offense. So I'm very interested to see what the Saints do on defense in terms of their pressuring and what they do with their rush, considering they haven't, again, they're only 31st in the NFL with 4-man pressures, and 2 of their best pass rushers, and Passanio and Davenport, are out for this game. Cam Jordan is still a stud, but 2 of their best dudes up front, 2 of their best dudes who generate pressure, again, Davenport leads the team in sacks, Passanio is tied for second, and they have 39 pressures between the 2 of them. That's all gone. So now you've got a team that traditionally rushes 4 or 3 in some form or fashion, and as Chris mentioned, they've started to not have Demario Davis be a free blitzer. So you've almost got a traditional 4-man or 3-man rush like Chris mentioned. And 2 of your best horses up front are all of a sudden not going. If the Bills can sit and protect Josh Allen and give him time and he doesn't have to press and he can find his reads and he can go through his progressions. Again, this isn't crazy. If the quarterback has time and he feels comfortable in the pocket, boom, things will be golden and good. I think the Bills have a good chance for that. Even if Spencer Brown is out and John Feliciano's still out and we have to run back that offensive line, I think they'll be able to handle the Saints up front given the injuries that the Saints have up front. But that's going to be the huge indicator. What are the Saints going to do in terms of coverage and pass rush? If the Saints can get pressure with 4 or 3 and they can live in that world where they're playing too high coverage and they're dropping 7 or 8 into their zones, they're going to do that all day. And they like to run man coverage again, as I mentioned. 41% of the time they have been in man coverage, which is the second most in the league. Very interested to see what happens with that because, as I mentioned earlier, the Bills killed man coverage last year. And as a result, teams have come into this year and they're not playing man. We saw the Jets do it a little bit and the Bills carved them right up. The Bills receivers are very, very, very difficult to cover in man coverage one-on-one situations. So if the Bills can win that matchup, force the Saints into zone, but then the Saints can't get pressure and Josh Allen has time, this is going to be the biggest thing to watch. And that's why I wanted to focus on in this episode, the O-lines and the D-lines and the coverage schemes, because on both sides of the ball, this is what is going to tell the tale of this game. How do the Bills attack the Saints' offensive line and vice versa? Do the Saints run more gap? If Mark Ingram's healthy, do they attack straight ahead like the Colts did with success with the traps and whams that they ran this past game? Do they give direct snaps to Taysom Hill? If they do, are they attacking dead on or are they attacking the edge? Are they going with sweeps or powers or options? How much window dressing is there? That O-line versus D-line matchup, because the Bills' defensive line has some guys that are out, especially on the interior. The Saints now have some guys that are out, but more on the edges of the offensive line and guys that are banged up. This is going to tell the tale 1,000%. Also, JD, I see your comment there in the chat. Is Kamara officially out? Yes, Alvin Kamara is officially out for tomorrow. So seeing what kind of running game the Saints operate with, because again, Carson Wentz was 11 of 20 last week for 106 yards. He made plays and throws when he had to, and he had a really nice escape of a sack by Mario Addison. But the Bills didn't lose that game because Carson Wentz beat them. The Bills lost that game because Jonathan Taylor and the Colts run game just gashed them and ran through them. They cannot allow that to happen again. I'm not saying that Trevor Simeon and Carson Wentz are the same. I think Simeon is worse than Carson Wentz. They cannot allow Trevor Simeon to have room to breathe. They cannot allow the Saints offense to get going. Again, from an emotional standpoint, which is 1,000% a thing in football, the Saints, they're a team of dogs. It's Thanksgiving night. It's primetime. Saints fans get loud. They love their team. They're super pumped. You cannot allow this team to start getting excited and starting to feel themselves and feeling like, okay, we can do this, so on and so forth, especially because the Bills are not good right now at coming from behind because they press so much. And then also when they press, it fits into the hand that the defense is trying to play where they want to just run zone. And Josh Allen is pressing and trying to fit throws into tight windows. And just by the law of odds and probability, at some point, you're not going to be perfect with a throw. That's where pass breakups happen, interceptions, drive killers, and all that stuff. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the Bills' defensive line does against the Saints' offensive line, given the injuries on both sides. Who can own that matchup is going to decide what happens in terms of Bills offense versus Saints offense. Bills defense, versus Saints offense. And on the flip side, Bills offense versus Saints defense, same thing. So much of this season comes down to the protection that Josh Allen has up front. I think we all underestimated how important the offensive line was to Josh Allen, which is crazy because I don't think that should ever be underestimated when it comes to a quarterback. But Josh Allen got blitzed a lot last year. He saw a lot of man coverage last year. He was able to dissect defenses quickly and early and often. He was able to make more simplistic reads. He was able to press the ball vertically and get the ball downfield. This year, not so much. Defenses are keeping everything in front of them. They are playing that zone coverage. And again, simple odds in math. You throw more guys in coverage, the better your odds are of making a play happen and forcing an incompletion or getting an interception. But you can't do that if You can't get pressure up front because it doesn't matter what kind of zone you play. If the quarterback just sits and waits and sits and waits, eventually someone's going to run open. So the Bills' offensive line versus the Saints' defensive line is the biggest key for that side of the ball because, one, for the pass and Josh Allen, like I just talked about, two, the run game. I'm going to continue to drill it home. I said in the offseason, I'm saying it now. Bills need to run the ball more. Now I'm not even saying it from an effective standpoint. Obviously, that's true, but they need to run the ball more with more frequency, and it needs to be with Matt Breida. At first, I was kind of joking. At first, it was like, oh, Marissa, I forget the Twitter handle, so forgive me, but she made that graphic for me, taking the "if Cena wins, we riot" from One Night Stand and replaced it with "if Breida sits, we riot." I've been tweeting it a whole bunch. It was kind of jokey and funny at first. Now it's like legitimately serious. Matt Breida needs to get more touches out of the backfield. He adds a speed element. He's not necessarily the long-term answer. And speed isn't everything, but how he uses his speed is tremendously important to the Bills' offense and to this run game. We need more Matt Breida. And Zach Moss was my RB1 coming into the year. I don't like the way he's running the ball and pitter-pattering his feet when he runs on both zone and gap runs. He's not hitting the hole hard. He's not getting vertical and getting his pads north and south. I don't know what's going on with him, but give me Matt Breida. Give me some option runs from Josh or some QB design runs. Give me some Devin Singletary sprinkled in. The Bills' running game has to be a factor, especially given how the Saints like to play those light boxes. The Saints want to play those light boxes and play coverage behind it, and it works for them. They're a good defense, and they're good at fitting the run. Despite that, again, when you throw a light box, the thought is, oh, man, we're not going to be able to stop the run. Saints play a lot of light boxes, and they're the number one rush defense in terms of DVOA because of how they fit, because of their integrity, because of the guys up front that Chris mentioned. So if you can't beat them one-on-one and you can't beat them with scheme, maybe you just beat them with pure numbers and run a little option and some reads and some RPOs like the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts. The Bills have to win that matchup. The O-lines versus D-lines on both sides of the ball will determine what happens in this game. Then the coverage on the back end is related to both of it. What kind of coverages will we see from the Saints, given how we talked in this episode with Chris about what the Saints traditionally like to do, but how teams have defended Josh Allen and vice versa. Now that Alvin Kamara is out, Trevor Simeon leading this team, the offensive line is banged up. What coverages will the Bills run in order to defend Trevor Simeon? There is a lot to consider from a matchup standpoint in this game, and stopping that Saints run is going to be interesting. One more stat I wanted to throw out there, stuffed percentage, which is the percentage of runs where the running back is tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage. The Saints are number one in the NFL with having runs that are stuffed at only 11%. They are number one. Granted, they have some injuries now. It's not the same line, but they're good at getting positive yards on offense. For reference, the Bills are 14th with a stuff percentage of 17. So 6 percentage points, 6 more percentage points in terms of having run stuffed. So not as good. And then adjusted line yards. This one's very interesting. This one takes all running back carries and assigns responsibility to the O-line based on percentage, based on a grade. The Saints are 10th at 4.4. The Bills are 6th at 4.65. So the Bills' offensive line has done good via adjusted line yards, again, taking all the running back carries and assigning responsibility to the offensive line, which is a very interesting metric considering how, we've seen the Bills with our eyes and seen it with the film. But this Saints offensive line is a good line, even though they're banged up. Can they open up holes for Mark Ingram? How do the Bills attack it? It's going to be interesting in terms of all these topics and what happens in this game. I'm also going to be throwing out some stuff on the old Twitter in terms of matchups and percentages and numbers and efficiency ratings and different scores that are going to tell the tale of the tape a little bit more in this game. So give me a follow on the old Twitter. Again, at pro__ant. That's pro 2 underscores ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. I threw up the old Toodles You Guys banner for this outro because we're starting to say goodbye on this episode of Disguise Coverage. I want to thank you guys for riding with me live here on this episode as always. And if you didn't watch live and you watched later or listened later or whatever, any shape or form, any listen, download, positive feedback, passing by word of mouth, anything. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage and to Cover One as a whole. It is tremendously important in terms of helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Please drop a like for this video on your way out. I know it's corny, but that goes a long way for us as well. Major thanks to Chris Voglu from the Straight Up Saints podcast and The Spun and Sports Illustrated. He was awesome. He was a tremendous guest. Go check him out. Give him a follow. Look at his content. He did a Bills Saints preview on his podcast earlier today, and it was really good. This has been a very fun time, as always. And I know it's the night before Thanksgiving, so I'm sure everybody's doing traveling stuff and getting things ready. If you're hosting Thanksgiving, prepping the house, getting meals ready, food, all that kind of stuff. And I appreciate that. Sean coming through with the comments, and you are kicking butt. I love your take on things. Thanks. Appreciate it, man. Oh, and Devin coming through saying, thanks, Pro and great stuff as per usual. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. I love seeing stuff like that. It's nice to know that you're appreciated. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. But yeah, thank you for taking the time out with me tonight. I know it's a holiday night, holiday weekend, all that stuff. Big game. Big 2 games over the next, 11, 12 days. Bills need to win this game against the Saints. And they need to win the 2 Monday nights from now against the Pats at home. Big game. Be nice to come out and get a win on Thanksgiving and then have 11 days to prep for the New England Patriots, which is an advantage for the Buffalo Bills. So big game tomorrow. Appreciate you guys stopping by. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all staying safe, are all doing well. Have a very happy Thanksgiving. I appreciate you guys. Go Bills. And as always, I will see you next week.